CEO was pronounced dead on wedding day. 5 years later, his wife discovers this on Instagram. The first time I saw him again wasn't in person. It was on a glass screen, a rectangle that suddenly shone at 2:14 in the morning as if a beacon had pierced the empty house. I wasn't looking for Daniel. I promised myself I wouldn't again, just letting the images accompany me as the silence echoed in the doorways. A carousel of travel photos, a sunset behind a pier, a glass of melting ice, someone's hand resting on a wooden railing with a crescent-shaped scar near the thumb. I stopped. I brought my fingers closer to the screen. The scar, the same one Daniel had been left with when, at 23, he broke a crystal glass while toasting an impossible contract. It never healed properly again. It was his secret mark, a signature on his skin. The account was from a young woman, a photographer passing through the Pacific coast. Valparaiso, Chile, the location read. The photo didn't show her entire face. Daniel was in profile, out of focus, his body leaning toward the sea, his hair caught in the wind. But the scar was clear, and so was the watch. A limited edition I had given him 2 weeks before our wedding. The wedding that didn't last into the night. The wedding that ended with sirens and a helicopter that was never seen again beyond the horizon. For 5 years, I learned to live the way one learns to walk after a fracture. Carefully, with silent rage every time the phantom bone aches where nothing remains. The official report said the helicopter had suffered a catastrophic failure as it turned away from the hotel toward the airfield. The pilot, a veteran with thousands of flight hours, was also lost. The control tower recorded one last transmission, interference, a truncated word, descend, and then static. No one found floating debris, no fuel on the water, not a single piece to tell the story. There was a funeral without a body, black and white photos printed on cardboard, flowers that withered punctually. There were business articles dedicating bronze adjectives to him, visionary, relentless, bold. There was a board of directors that didn't wait even 3 weeks to appoint stable interim directors, and there were lawyers who taught me how to sign with a steady hand papers that stated inheritance, corporate participation, trust. I opened the photo on Instagram, my pulse racing, as if each beat were a step toward a ledge. I enlarged it until the grain dissolved. The scar was Daniel's. The watch was Daniel's. The posture, the way he leaned his weight on his right leg when he was tired, was also Daniel's. I didn't breathe until I read the comments. The pier is so beautiful. The light in Valpo is unique. Where is this bar? The photographer responded to one. Bar El Tercero, Subida, Ecuador. Excellent pisco sour. My heart sank to my stomach like a stone into water. I went to his profile. Featured stories, a sequence from the same afternoon. In one of them, reflected in a glass, I saw his entire silhouette. He was wearing a grey linen shirt. Daniel hated linen because he said it made him look untidy, and yet that body in the reflection moved with the same economy of gestures he used when he didn't want to attract attention. I saved each capture like someone collecting breadcrumbs in a forest that refuses to end. Then came the question I'd avoided for years. What if he's not dead? Not what if he's alive, because saying alive seemed to betray time, the documents, the rain that night. I said not dead, and listened to myself as if I were someone else, someone who had just woken up in an unfamiliar room. That night I didn't sleep. I reviewed my own memories as if they were evidence. The helicopter taking off over the sea, the laughter of people who didn't yet know, the sound of a toast that never came. I remembered my mother-in-law repeating that Daniel always had the habit of disappearing for hours when he was thinking. I remembered that the night before he had asked me, quietly, if I really wanted that ring with that stone, as if sensing that symbols weigh more than fingers. I remembered, and this pierced me, that his last message, sent 15 minutes before the supposed failure, said only, "Sorry for the noise. See you soon." The noise, the nothingness. At 9 in the morning, I bought a ticket to Santiago with a carry-on bag. I didn't tell anyone. After closing the door, the house remained with the hall light on, as if I were returning with bread and not a story that could demolish 5 years of mourning. On the plane, the world was reduced to the sound of the engines and the blue line on the screen showing our progress. I thought about the company, about the partners who treated me like an ornamental widow while my signature unlocked invisible safes. I thought about the audit that was never completed because the servers failed the same month as the accident. I thought about Bruno, the CFO, with his fake, hospitable smile. I thought about the pilot who disappeared without any family to complain. I thought about the possibility that it had all been a show. Valparaiso greeted me with the scent of salt and paint, with its hills that rise like doubts and a sun that seems to hang from the cables. Finding the Ecuadorian subway was a no-brainer. I asked a taxi driver, and he looked at me in the mirror with a mixture of curiosity and habit. Here the lost of the landscape. El Tercero was a bar tucked into a corner, its wood carved by impatient hands, and its walls covered with anonymous photographs. Laughing mouths, sleeping dogs, ships stranded in some foreign memory. I walked in with my sunglasses on, even though the interior was cool and the light didn't hurt. I didn't expect to find him standing there waiting, because even in my imagination, Daniel never lent himself to easy scenes. I sat at the bar, ordered a coffee. Everyone here ordered pisco, but I needed the clear bitterness, and let my eyes learn the human map of the place. I saw him on the fourth movement of a door. He came out of the kitchen with a case of bottles, carefully set the case down, greeted with an almost imperceptible gesture someone I didn't see, and cleaned a table with a patience I know. The profile, the scar on his thumb, the watch that no longer shone because the metal had learned the shadow. It was Daniel, or someone who wore his skin like a suit that fit him perfectly. There was no dramatic music, just a clinking glass and the street that passed with a limping dog. I stood up, walked over to him, and only then remembered I didn't know what word to use to break the world. "Daniel," I said. He raised his head with a minimal start, the kind of startle someone who doesn't want to admit that a bomb has just gone off next to him. He looked at me as if I were a photo he wasn't expecting to see printed, as if the algorithm had decided to mock him. His pupils dilated, then contracted. Then the smile. A smile I couldn't tell if it was a defense or a reminder. "Sorry," he replied in Spanish laced with an Argentine or Uruguayan accent. I couldn't tell. "You're mistaken. I'm not Daniel." "You are," I said, the words spilling out with a conviction that kept me standing. "You are Daniel Salvatierra." The girl at the bar looked, then looked away. Time grew thick. He lowered his towel, silently assessing the distance between the back door and me. "Don't do this here," he finally breathed, in our home Portuguese. "Please." We followed the hallway to a small courtyard planted with flower pots. The noise of the city became a murmur, like when you put your ear to the sea and hear an old secret. We looked at each other in a storm that wasn't made of wind, but of unspoken things. I wanted to touch his face to confirm that beneath his skin there was no other. I didn't. "How?" I asked, and the question contained all the others. "Why? What for? With whom?" "I told you not to do this here," he repeated, but it was a different tone. He sat down on the steps, gestured for me to sit next to him, and for a moment the memory insisted that this position was one for Sunday, for a newspaper and coffee with half a loaf of bread. "I can't explain everything to you on a patio." "I shouldn't explain anything to you. You married me in the morning and died in the afternoon," I said, controlling my voice. "We've been burying your name on every birthday for 5 years. If there's a shouldn't, it doesn't belong to you." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she let in the man I had loved, not the stranger who worked in a bar with a random name. "They forced me," she said with a calmness that infuriated me. "I thought it was the only way to save you." "Save me from what?" The word bounced among the pots. "The noise you heard in the message," he said, "wasn't from the helicopter. It was from the tapped phone. They had everything, Elena. Your accounts, the company calendar, our itineraries. The Qatar contract was a facade. We had built up too much. We were going to a war that isn't fought in uniforms, and I was the prize. The accident was the only agreement that didn't kill us on the same day." I felt a laugh rise inside me, not from humor but from disbelief. "Who?" "I can't name names." His eyes moved as if measuring an invisible perimeter. "It's not fiction. People disappear because they sign the wrong paper and because the word loyalty is a hook. What happened with the helicopter was a neat set piece. The pilot didn't die. No one died there. 2 hours before takeoff, they took me out the service door, still in my suit, and took me to a house on the coast. I sent you the message from a borrowed phone. After that, nothing. And 5 years without a single line?" My voice came out harsh. 5 years watching your company get sold off, your office taken over, your name cleared until it's nothing but an empty display case. If I wrote to you, I marked you, he said. I was marked anyway. They promised me that if I disappeared from the map, they'd let you breathe. Nothing happened to you, right? The way he asked irritated me, as if he were the one guarding a statistic. You're alive. I was able to sustain that much at least. Living is not breathing, I said. We remained silent. Someone in the bar laughed too loudly. Valparaiso smelled of olives and salt, and something metallic I couldn't name. Why now? I finally asked. Why let yourself be photographed? Why risk being seen? Because it's over, he replied softly. Because the tables have turned. Because I believed that if the algorithm found me, you would find me too, and I preferred that you find me before them. The words opened a corridor of possibilities that both frightened and sustained me. Do you want to go back? I said. And the simplicity of the question surprised me. Go back to what? To whom? To the company that was no longer his? To a marriage stopped on day one? To a country that would put him in handcuffs for fraud before listening to reason? I want you to know the truth, he replied, and I want to finish what started the day of the helicopter. End, the word weighed heavily. With whom? How? As we spoke, a shadow crossed the courtyard. It was the girl from the counter carrying a box to the warehouse. Her gaze touched ours like a feather testing the wind direction. Daniel waited until she'd left before continuing. The CFO kept the company and the file. He moved pieces. He owes favors to people who won't take no for an answer. If I show up with nothing, they'll swallow me up. If I show up with evidence, maybe they'll swallow each other up. It wasn't a promise. It was a conjecture uttered in the voice of someone who, through sheer hiding, has forgotten what certainty sounds like. Proof, I repeated. A copy of the servers before they were taken down, he said. Records of transfers that left the company as loans and returned as consortiums. Emails. A falsified contract. Loose items that together create a map. And where is that map? He looked at me with something that was both pride and concern. Where those in a hurry wouldn't look for it. Here, he touched his chest, and in a place where only you can open it. I understood before asking. I still had access to a vault we once shared, a digital vault to which, out of boredom or laziness, no one had revoked my permissions. If they killed you, why didn't they lock all the doors? Because it was in their interest to keep it simple. A dead person without remains is a ghost that entertains the press, and a ghost distracts. I felt a wave of warmth that didn't come from the sun. In 5 years, I hadn't managed to hate him. I had trained myself to live without him, to curse his absence, to negotiate with God and myself the idea that one can't keep anyone, not even with promises uttered at an altar. But to hate him, no. And now he was giving me a mission, or a trap in the form of a mission. I didn't know which. If I help you, I said, if I open that trunk and find what you're talking about and put it away, what do we do next? Then we stopped hiding, he said, and for the first time it didn't sound like a slogan, but rather a wish. We were interrupted by a sudden visit. 2 men climbed the patio stairs with the ease of someone who'd climbed them 1,000 times. One was tall, with tattoos on his knuckles. The other was thin and wearing a clean shirt. They didn't look at me. They looked at Daniel with the familiarity of someone checking your pulse. Is your order ready? The thin one asked. Daniel nodded, stood up, and returned to the kitchen as if it were just another afternoon. The tall one stared at me for a second, a long second, then smiled toothlessly and followed his companion. I felt the air change weight. When Daniel returned, he did so with measured breathing. We need to talk somewhere else, he said, not disguising his need. Tonight, on the elevator at Mariposas Hill at 10. You go up, you go down, you go up. On the second trip, I'll get on with you and we'll walk. No phone. And until then, I didn't want to leave him. I wanted to touch his scar and ask him if it hurt like it used to in the cold. I wanted to hate him a little and forgive him a little more. Until then, be Elena, he replied. That sustained me for 5 years, knowing you were still you. I left the bar with the midday light sinking in like a new truth. Thirst and dizziness. The body always reacts when the soul races faster. I walked aimlessly, learning to read the hills as if they were lines on a palette I didn't know. I bought a cheap notebook and a pen. Writing by hand seemed safer than relying on a keyboard that betrays me. I wrote everything down, names, gestures, details, smells. In an antique shop, I found a map of Valparaiso from the 1970s, and I liked thinking that the streets have changed less than we think, that the city has a memory of feet, and that, if you listen to it, It guides you. At 9:45, I was in the elevator. The iron had the temperature of old promises. I did as he asked. I went up, down, up again. On the second ride, a man wearing a cap and a few months' beard got in. Daniel. My heart, which I thought had been tamed, started trotting again. "Let's walk," he said without drama. We turned into a narrow alley that smelled of fresh paint and damp. 2 blocks away, an empty viewing platform presented us with the city like a cutout model. We could hear distant televisions, laughter, and a sleepless dog. Daniel took a small, unbranded USB drive out of his pocket. "Don't plug it in at home," he said. "Don't plug it in anywhere obvious. There's a co-working space next to a consulate. No one looks twice at anyone who enters there. Open the vault from that network. Download only an index. Don't download large files. In the index, you'll see folder names that will tell you where to look, and you. I'm going to disappear again for a few days." I swallowed my protest. "Not for fun. For timing. If they saw me with you, I should move. If they didn't see me, I should. You said you'd rather I find you than them." I said it like someone defending a tiny territory they've just conquered. "I'm not going to give that up just like that. And I'm not asking you to let go of anything," he whispered. "I'm asking you to hold it with your other arm." I tucked the key into a seam of my satchel. When I turned around, Daniel was no longer at my side. He had taken 2 steps into the shadows, and in that gesture, I recognized the man calculating before leaping. "If anything goes wrong," he said, "if you suspect you're being followed, go to the Blue House at 430 Templeman Street. Ask for Milo. Tell him you're from me. He's the closest thing to an ally I have left." "What did they do to you in these 5 years?" I asked, not knowing if I wanted to hear an inventory of nights. "I was taught to renounce my name," he said, "but not my memory. We said goodbye the way people say goodbye when they don't know which version of each other they'll encounter next time. I went down alone. I bought bread on a corner just to hold something warm in my hands. The body is pacified by rituals that soothe. I slept fitfully. I dreamed of the sea like a sheet covering a table where someone was keeping files under tablecloths. The next morning I went to the co-working space and the neighboring consulate. The traffic of people in suits made me invisible. The receptionist gave me a table next to an artificial plant. I connected the key. I opened the trunk. The index appeared like an impersonal list, and yet I knew I was looking at our history from the inside of the lock. Folder 01, Bridges. Folder 02, Rivers. Folder 03, Shadows. It wasn't poetry, it was code. I opened Bridges, contracts with banks we never lent to. I inspected rivers, flows of capital that made perfect circles never reaching any sea. Shadows had names. Bruno's was repeated in seemingly innocent file titles. Quarterly report, expense review. In the metadata, something else. The real author, a certain P. Vargas. The date changed 3 times in the same week. Editing location, an IP address the system recognized as an external office. I only saved the index and a screenshot of the metadata. The rest, I didn't. I shut down the computer and for the first time in 5 years, thought the air could serve me for more than just survival. As I left, a man in a brown jacket held the door for me with a friendly smile. "Thank you," I said. In the reflection in the glass, I saw he was wearing a tiny earpiece. I kept walking. On the corner, another man pretended to be on the phone. I picked up my pace and hailed a random taxi, then walked down 2 blocks later and ducked into a bookstore. I hid among school atlases and music stave notebooks. No one came in behind me. At the register, the owner counted coins like someone praying. I bought a notebook, and when he gave me back my change, he touched my fingers with a gesture I couldn't tell if it was an accident or a warning. "Templeman is safer," he said quietly, not looking at me. I left, my skin crawling. Who had told him my route to the city? I walked up Templeman Street like I'm making a decision. The Blue House had a door with peeling paint and a doorbell that didn't ring. I knocked. A man in his 50s opened it, his hair pulled back, his eyes like those who look twice before believing. "I'm looking for Milo," I said. "It depends on who asks," he replied with blunt neutrality. "I'm from Daniel." The name made the windows tremble slightly, as if the wind had blown past at that exact moment. He ushered me in without ceremony. The living room was filled with maps and cables. It smelled of tin and coffee. "Were you followed?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted, and the honesty sounded like an alarm. "I have this." I took out the key. I heard in my own voice the mixture of fear and hunger, that comes when you finally discover that you are capable of so many things you never imagined. Milo turned on an old laptop, one of those that no one would steal today if they had others on hand. "No one comes in here unless I want them to," he said. And I couldn't tell if he meant the network, the house, or me. He unlocked the computer in a basement-like environment. "This isn't evidence yet," he said without looking up. "This is evidence. Evidence is something that when you name it in front of a judge forces another to shut up." He looked at the index finger, whistled barely at the metadata. Whoever put this together knew how to dance. "Daniel," I said. "Daniel," he repeated. "Yes, and someone else. He doesn't know these subtleties." He said it with respect, not mockery. "We're going to make one copy, another key, and a third cloud that isn't called a cloud. You're going to take copy 1. I'm keeping copy 2, copy 3. Copy 3 doesn't exist until we need it. And then? Then we'll decide if we want the police to knock on the wrong door or the right one. To do that, we first need to check something we're not going to like. Who signed the helicopter's flight permit that afternoon? If you give me the exact time of takeoff, I'll cross-reference it with a couple of records that aren't public." I searched my memory. The toast that wasn't given, the group photo, the clock synchronized with the pilot's. 17:20, I said. Milo typed without looking. 17:20, good. Hotel checkout. Permit granted at 16:58 by... He stopped suddenly, as if the word had suddenly become toothless. "The permit is signed by someone close to you, Elena." "Who?" "A woman with legal access to the address book and security seals. Your assistant." I remembered Lise, with her perfect hair, with her clockwork efficiency. Lise, who cried with me in the hotel bathroom, who held my back, who stayed until dawn, answering the press. Lise, who brought me soup the following week, who left my freezer full, who emptied her drawer when the new management replaced her with another. Lise, who texted me for a while and then never again. I felt the floor move an inch. "Are you okay?" Milo asked without paternal concern, almost as if he were more interested in the state of the network than mine. "I don't know," I replied again, no longer ashamed to repeat that phrase. "Sometimes the only truth available is the confession of not knowing. You're going to have to talk to Daniel tonight," he said, "but don't do it at the bar. And if you want to keep breathing smoothly, take control of the schedule. They work with habits. They know what time you have coffee, what time you turn off the lights, what time you call your mother. Change everything, starting now." He looked at me with a determination that forced me to move within my own body. "Eleanor, when you come back from the dead, or when you bring back a dead person, you don't allow yourself to be naive. It's that simple." I left the blue house with the sky stretching to violet. The sea below had a mirror-like face that had endured too many faces. I sat on a staircase watching the city's windows light up one by one. In my pocket, the USB drive weighed less than a piece of candy. On my chest, more than a stone. And yet there was a strange calm, as if for the first time in 5 years the map of my life had an arrow that said, "You are here." That night I didn't wait for Daniel in an elevator. I went to the dock where he'd been photographed. The wind carved the wood. At 10:05 I felt his presence before his voice. "I told you we'd walk," he said, and smiled faintly, and for the first time in 2 days I knew the smile wasn't a defense, but a crack through which you can see the old house. "Lise signed the flight permit," I said without preamble, "and someone with the IP address of external office rewrote 3 times a report that Bruno presented as final." "What happened with Lise hurts me less than it should," he said. "Maybe because it doesn't surprise me. Maybe because I've been training myself for 5 years to live with the idea that loyalty is also a contract with invisible penalties." He leaned on the railing. "Bruno isn't going to give in by email. He's going to give in out of fear. And fear, Eleanor, is negotiated with air but held in place with papers." "Then let's make the paperwork," I said, and my voice held a new steel. "Milo will make copies. I'll open doors. You'll bring back what's missing from your memory." She looked at me with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "What?" I asked. "I married a woman capable of all this, and I didn't see the full extent of it," he replied. "Or I knew it, and that's why I clumsily tried to protect her." I didn't say anything. Sometimes love doesn't need celebrating. It needs work. We stared at the water for a while. Across the bay, a light blinked 3 times, a signal I'd agreed upon with Milo to say safe house. "Tomorrow you'll return to your city," Daniel said. "You'll enter the company through the front door, with your last name, with your rights, with your grief intact, and your doubts now armed. They won't deny you coffee. Smile. Ask for the file you know doesn't exist. Look Bruno in the eye and ask him for P. Vargas, then you leave like someone who's just done any old errand. And you, I'm going to go find someone who doesn't want to be found. But if I find him, he'll save us 2 years of back and forth. The pilot. He said it with a simplicity that made me realize the magnitude of the undertaking. Bringing a man from the depths of a broken deal. What if they find you first? Then you'll know which photo to upload. He looked at me straight on, just one, no description. The scar from my thumb holding a glass. Whoever needs to understand will understand. I nodded. We walked to the edge of the pier like people edging a prayer. There was no cinematic kiss, no promises made to the moon. There was a pact between two people who had learned too much from silence. We parted with the certainty of a to-do list. And yet, when he walked away, I felt the old tug in my chest, that string that tightens between two bodies that were once home. Back in my room, I wrote everything down in my notebook. I changed my alarm times. I changed my route to the co-working space. I changed my habits like someone learning a new choreography. I slept little, and when the sun came through the curtain, I knew I had crossed a border. I was no longer the widow displayed in magazines, the statue accompanying an editorial. I was a woman with a map, with a name, with a key. I was finally someone who was going to tell her own version of the story. The next morning, I flew back. Upon landing, I was greeted by the same signs that had greeted me 5 years earlier. Taxis, hotels, welcome. I smiled at no one. In the airport bathroom mirror, I combed my hair as if I were going to a party. It was clear to me that the first battle would be fought at a boardroom table, with water poured into crystal glasses, not in a courtroom. I called the company concierge. Good morning, this is Elena Salvatierra. Could you please connect me with Mr. Bruno? Bruno greeted me with the smile I'd always hated. Stretched skin, the eyes of someone evaluating your price per meter. Elena, he said with manufactured affection, what a pleasant surprise. It's good to see you. He offered me a hug, which I declined. He offered me coffee, which I also declined. I sat down and placed my hands on the table, palms down. It's a small gesture, but it anchors you. I need the internal audit report for the quarter prior to the accident, I said bluntly. The final one. Bruno blinked slowly. Elena, you know that process. Well, the circumstances, the servers. Anyway, we have a summary. I want the final version. I looked at him without blinking. Signed with the author's real name, with P. Vargas in the metadata. There was a crack, I saw it. It's small at first, like a suppressed laugh, then it grows and pierces the mask. Bruno looked away toward the window for a split second. P. Vargas? He repeated with feigned curiosity. Who is it? I'd like to know that. I smiled with the kindness of a funeral. Oh, and one more question. Did you personally sign the helicopter flight permit that day, or did you delegate it? His jaw clenched. He didn't respond. Silence is a way of acknowledging that you understand what's being discussed. I stood up like someone leaving a pleasant meeting. Thanks, Bruno. I'll send you an email with the exact list of files, and tell Lais to call me if she can. I have a bouquet of flowers to thank her for her loyalty all these years. I used the word with innocence laden with meaning. I saw him swallow his fear and anger. As I left the building, my phone vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number, a one-line message. The pilot wants to talk. Below, an address, the least glamorous neighborhood in the city, the name of a mechanic's shop. I breathed. I was inside a story I hadn't written, but for which for the first time I had the pen, and I knew with the clarity with which one recognizes one's own face in dark glass, that, whatever happened, I would never again be the statue in a photo under a black frame. If love still had a place in all this, we would discover it without rushing it. If justice did, we would invoke it with papers and light. If fear wanted to stay, we would leave an empty chair for it so it wouldn't wander around the house at night. That night, before heading to the workshop, I uploaded a single photo to my Instagram. I took it in Valparaiso, Daniel's hand holding a glass on aged wood, the moon-shaped scar tracing his old name. No text, no hashtags, no drama, just the image. The first reaction was a direct message from Lais. Can we talk? The second, an email with no sender and an attachment, P. Vargas ID. The third, a voiceless call that lasted 3 seconds and hung up. At the door, the car was waiting. I grabbed my purse, touched the seam where I hid the key, turned off the lights and left. I didn't say goodbye to the house. There was no need to. When you start telling your own version, the walls know the story has already crossed the street. The engine noise mingled with the distant murmur of the sleeping city. The car moved slowly, as if each stoplight measured my worth. I didn't know if what I was going to find in that garage would be an explanation or a trap. The route led me to an industrial neighborhood, where dogs roamed among scrap metal, and the lampposts seemed tired of providing light. The night smelled of burnt oil and something older, like iron and fear. The sign was simple: San Martin Workshop. The blue paint was peeling, the metal door ajar. There was no visible light inside, save for a yellowish bulb hanging over a tool bench. I rang the bell once. Nothing. I rang it again. A voice answered from inside. "Who?" "I'm from Daniel," I said, feeling that the name was a key and a sentence. Silence. Then a hinge creaked, and the face of a man, aged by sun and smoke, appeared from the shadows. He had pale eyes, a wing tattoo on his neck, and an expression that oscillated between wariness and guilt. "Happens." The gate closed behind me with a loud thud. The air was thick with metallic dust. Open engines, disassembled parts, a small television broadcasting static. The man wordlessly motioned me to a chair and lit a cigarette. His hand trembled slightly. "Are you the pilot?" I asked. "It depends on who asks." "Elena Salvatierra." The cigarette hung in the air. A spark fell onto the cement floor and went out on its own. "Then yes," he replied, his voice raspy. "I guess you already know too much." "I just know you didn't die," I said. "And neither did Daniel." The man gave a dry, humorless laugh. "That's more than most people can say." He looked at me for a few seconds, as if evaluating whether telling me the truth was a way to save himself or a way to sink. Finally, he spoke. "That afternoon, the helicopter took off empty. I stood still. Empty. Completely." He approached the bench and pulled out an old folder with yellowed papers. What fell into the sea was an aftershock, a device rigged to explode at a certain altitude. We controlled it remotely from a boat. We had orders. They told us it was a security operation, that it was to protect a witness. They never said the witness was your husband. Who gave the orders? The name I heard was Bruno, but he wasn't working alone. There was a woman with him. Lice, I think. They came with ministry uniforms, credentials, permits, everything legal. I didn't hesitate. Why would I? They paid me in cash and told me to disappear for a while after the flight. I didn't find out until weeks later that everyone thought we were dead. Each word stuck like a needle. Lies, lies again. "And then?" I asked. "Why didn't you talk? Why hide?" "I tried to," he replied. "I went to the police, but the officer who helped me already knew my name. He told me that if I kept talking, my family would pay the price. 3 days later, my house burned down in an accidental fire. I've been living here ever since, under a different name, in fear." The pilot sat opposite me, his greasy hands clasped together. "If Daniel contacted you, it's because time is up. What we did, what they made us do, is about to come to light. But don't think this is just a fraud. No, there's something bigger. It wasn't just his company. It was a network, and Daniel was the key. Someone needed to wipe him off the board." My breathing became irregular. "What network?" "A mix of phantom contracts, technology, clean energy, and money laundering. They used the company's name to move state money into private accounts. By the time Daniel became suspicious, it was too late. Bruno offered him a deal. He refused, and that's where it all began. He passed me a photo, Daniel and Bruno, smiling at a conference. Between them in the background, a blurred figure, Lais. Her gaze toward the camera wasn't casual, it was a challenge. "There were 4 of us who knew about the flight," the pilot continued. 2 are gone now. 1 disappeared at the border. I'm the last. And you just put your name on the list." Before he could respond, the sound of an engine outside interrupted the scene. 2 headlights illuminated the lower slit in the tailgate. The pilot immediately turned off the main beam. Everything went dark. "Are you waiting for someone?" I whispered. "No." He pulled an old pistol from a drawer and gestured to me. Silence. The gate rattled with a bang. "Open up!" a male voice shouted from outside. The pilot approached a small side window and peered in. Then he murmured, "They're theirs." Another blow. "Police. Open now." "They're not police," the pilot said, now certain. In a swift movement, he took me by the arm and led me toward a back door. "Run, Elena. Don't look back. There's a hallway to the right and a gate at the end. Don't stop. Run." The third blow was louder, metallic. I ran. I heard a shot behind me, then another. The echo bounced off the walls of the workshop. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder and screams. I crossed the gate with trembling hands and continued until I lost my breath. When I stopped, the silence was so brutal, it hurt. From a distance, I saw the reflection of a nascent fire in the sky. The workshop was burning, and I understood that they had just erased another piece from the board. That night I didn't return to the hotel. I took refuge in a cheap guest house near the port, under a false name. The noise of the ships lulled me to sleep and, at the same time, kept me awake. Daniel didn't answer my messages. No calls, no calls. Just the certainty that if they'd found the pilot, they'd soon find me. I opened the notebook and wrote everything down. Every detail, every sentence, every smell. It wasn't a diary, it was a testimony. Something inside me knew that if they made me disappear, that notebook would survive. I hid it inside an old Bible in my room, between Genesis and Exodus. At 3 a.m., my phone vibrated with a notification, an encrypted message from a new account. It simply read, "Don't go back to the bar. Lais traveled to Chile. Trust Milo." My heart skipped a beat. Lais was in the country. The woman who had signed my husband's death, the same one that was coming for me now. 2 days later, Milo contacted me from a foreign number. "Elena, listen. The flight logs are encrypted, but I found something worse. There are recent transfers from a Swiss account in the name of Fideicomiso Salvatierra. That trust was closed years ago," I said. "You think so? It's active, and someone is using it to move money. Who? Lies, but not alone. There's an authorization signature that belongs to you." He paused. "They forged your signature, Elena. They're using you as a cover." I felt a dry vertigo as if the ground had opened up. "What can I do?" "Go back. Not to your house. Downtown. I need you to be in a public place when you open the next file I'm going to send you. Don't open it before then, not alone. And for God's sake, don't trust anyone who uses Daniel's name before you." The flight home was a fog of anxiety. In my head, everything was a collage of fire, names, and fragments. Daniel was still missing. The pilot was probably dead, and Lais moving like a shadow with the face of a friend. I landed in my hometown on a cloudy Monday. I stayed in a modest hotel, the same one where Daniel and I had spent our first night after the wedding. Everything seemed the same, except now I didn't believe in mirrors. I turned on my laptop and opened Milo's email. Subject: File Marud 2. Do not open until ready. I waited. I took a deep breath. I opened it. A video, taken with a hidden camera. In the recording, Bruno and Lais in a meeting room. Bruno said, "She doesn't suspect anything." Lais replied, "He'll do it soon. But it doesn't matter. By the time he finds Daniel, it'll be too late." Bruno smiled. Then the circle closes. 2 dead people don't make a sound. The image stopped there, frozen. My face, reflected on the screen, was that of someone who had already crossed a point of no return. I stared into the darkness outside the window for several long minutes. Then I typed a short message to Milo. Time to finish it. And I made a decision that was irreversible. If the board wanted me as a piece, I would be the queen. The silence was broken by a distant thunderclap. It was raining again. It always rains before a truth. The rain had washed the city as if trying to erase the traces of the living. From my window, the car headlights formed golden rivers that flowed aimlessly. I reviewed the video once more, focusing on each of Lais's micro-gestures, her sideways glance, the imperceptible tremor in her right thumb, the way she avoided saying my name. There was fear in her, but also something worse, conviction. I decided not to notify Milo, or Daniel, if he could still read my messages. That battle was mine. I tucked the USB drive into the lining of my coat and headed out at dawn, when the air still smelled of wet metal and freshly baked bread. The address Milo had tracked down in the file led to an office tower facing the river. The name on the facade struck me. Salvatierra Group, my last name, transformed into a shield for those who had soiled it. I walked in with a firm stride. No one stopped me. The new receptionists only saw a woman dressed in black with a determined look. The elevator rose slowly, as if it suspected what was about to happen. Floor 21. The glass door had a bright sign, Executive Director, Lais Montero. I knocked once. "Come in," said a voice I knew all too well. Between. Lais stood by the window, watching the rain fall on the avenue. Her reflection in the glass duplicated her, and for a moment I had the feeling she was talking to both of them. She was dressed in white as if the color could absolve her. When she turned around, her smile was a knife wrapped in velvet. "Elena," he whispered. "What a surprise." "Not so much," I replied. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time." He sat down slowly, crossing his legs, studying my face like someone measuring damage before repairing it. "I guess you already know everything," he said softly. "I know enough," I replied. "That you signed the flight permit, that Bruno planned the crash, that they used my name to launder money, that they killed the pilot." His expression did not change. "Not all the dead are innocent, nor are all the living guilty. Daniel played his game too, Eleanor. Do you really think he was a victim?" "I saw him," I said, taking a step closer. "He's alive. I saw him with my own eyes." The silence that followed was more violent than a scream. Laius blinked slowly, unsurprised. "So he broke the deal." "What deal?" "That if I disappeared, you would live." He leaned forward. "Do you think you survived by chance? They forgave you because he paid. With his name, with his life, with his identity. And now, thanks to you, it all starts again." "I didn't come here to hear threats," I said. "I came here to put an end to it." I took out the USB key and left it on the table. "Here's the evidence. The transfers, the contracts, the emails, everything you and Bruno thought to bury. It's in the cloud, replicated. If anything happens to me, it'll be in the press." For the first time, I saw a crack in his face. Lais stood up, walked to the window, and her reflection returned to me a shadow that was not human. "You don't understand anything, Elena." His voice cracked. "This isn't about us anymore. There are people higher up than you can imagine. I was just following orders. Bruno was an idiot with borrowed power. Daniel was—" He stopped, took a deep breath. "The only one who tried to save you. And now you've condemned him again." "Where is it?" I asked. "I don't know." Her response was quick, too quick. "But if he's still alive, he won't be around for long. They've already looked for him in Chile. The fire was a warning." My hands shook, but I showed no fear. "Then we'll both go to hell," I said. But this time, with first and last names, I took out my phone and opened the video of her meeting with Bruno. I played it in front of her. Lais stared at him without blinking. When the frozen image showed his face, she smiled sadly. "You don't know what you're doing," he muttered. "Yes, I know," I replied. "I'm giving voices back to the dead." She sighed, resigned. "Then it's done." He took his phone, typed something quickly and left it on the desk. "Go now, Eleanor, before they get here." "Who is it?" "Those who come to erase. They always arrive when you think you've already won." I didn't think twice. I ran down the stairs as the hallway lights flickered. On the 17th floor, I heard the sound of the elevator. Footsteps, radios, boots. On the 10th floor, a muffled explosion. On the 5th, smoke. When I got out into the lobby, the alarm was blaring and people were running in all directions. Outside, the rain was falling slantingly, mingling with the smell of the fire. I got into a taxi with no destination. Through the fogged-up glass, I watched the flames climb the tower that bore my name. For a moment I felt compassion for Lais. Then I remembered her smile. That night, Milo called me from a hidden number. "I saw it on the news," she said. "Lai died. Bruno too. There are no witnesses left, Elena." "Yes, there are," I replied. "Us." Silence on the other side. "And Daniel?" "Nothing," I said. "But I know it's still there. Somehow, I know." "Then listen," he added. "If you want to survive, disappear. Now. I have a safe route south, new papers, new names." "And you?" I asked. "I haven't existed for years," he replied, and hung up. 2 weeks later, I crossed the border under the name Ana Duarte. I had only one suitcase with me, the notebook and a folded photograph. Daniel's hand with the moon-shaped scar. The town where I took refuge was surrounded by mountains and silence. There, time didn't run. It glided slowly, like water over stone. I opened a small cafe. No one asked about the past. No one recognized the name Salvatierra. Months passed. One winter afternoon, while cleaning the tables before closing, a tourist left behind a brown envelope. It had no name on it, just a drawing. A crescent moon. I opened it. Inside was a recent photo. Daniel, standing on a different pier, looking toward the horizon. On the back, a phrase written in his handwriting. "When everything goes dark, the truth doesn't die. It just changes its face." I cried for the first time without fear. I turned off the lights in the room and stayed listening to the rain hitting the roof. Just like that night at the beginning, I knew that one day I would see him again. Or that perhaps I was already seeing him, in every reflection, in every shadow, in every story, told by those who return from the dead. And so finally, I stopped seeking justice. I just wanted to remember. Because sometimes, surviving is also a form of resurrection.